Welcome to Eastern State Penitentiary. I'm Sean Kelly. I am the Director of Interpretation, and I've worked with artists here for 20 years now. Started in 1995 working with artists in this building. And I will say that if I think back over the best programming we've had, more than half of it easily is partnerships we've had with artists. So welcome and thank you. We understand that these proposals are a lot of work. We realize it's not a ton of money, so thank you. I wish we had money to support everybody. But this is the process we've gone through. We've created over 90 artist installations. We've partnered with more than 90 artists to create pieces for our visitors. And so we are heading now into the 2016 season. So if you're watching from home, this is a 2015, this is June of 2015. We're talking about the 2016 cycle, work that will be installed in May of 2016 for our artists, for our visitors by artists. So some of the guidelines in future years might change. We're videotaping this morning just so artists who can't get to Philadelphia get a sense of what the orientation is like. So, you know who I am. I'm Sean. I'm also wearing the name tag somewhere. Let's, if you don't mind, tell the group who you are, where you came from. We'll see who came from the greatest distance, who came from the shortest. We usually get a pretty good spread. And if you're comfortable categorizing the type of work you do, let us know that as well. Welcome to Philadelphia. Welcome to Eastern State. We're going to take about an hour. We're going to walk through this abandoned building. It's sort of a combination. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the artwork and let you see about 2/3 of the pieces that are on view today. You're also welcome to stay until 5 o'clock and see everything else that you like. You can go out and get lunch. Just tell the staff you're leaving. They'll stamp your hand like a nightclub and come back. But I do hope you take the opportunity to also take the audio tour if you haven't already, or a history tour. We have a history tour at 2 o'clock. But this is not a history tour. What we're going to do right now, I'm assuming that you have the basic history or that you'll figure it out later. And we'll go through, as I say, for about an hour and talk about the work that's here. And I have a couple at each stop. I'll have a couple of topics I would address, but if you have any questions, I can, of course, answer them out of order. I want to start by telling you a little bit about the process and to be clear about the process, to be transparent. We solicit proposals every summer. We have a consultant named Jenny Shanker, who's an artist, a wonderful sculptor in her own right, and a curator. She and I have partnered on this program off and on for 20 years. Jenny and I read every proposal, and we, depending on the year, eliminate between a third. Last year we eliminated close to half of them, honestly, of work that we thought we were both confident, if we ever disagree, we send it on to the committee, but work that we're pretty confident isn't the right fit for the space for one reason or another. I'm mostly looking at programming issues. She's mostly looking at artistic quality, but we both read every proposal, and if we both agree it's not going to make it through the committee, then we don't make the committee read them because there's so many proposals that come in. The remaining proposals, last year was, I think, about 50, go onto the committee. That's a group of artists from the outside, many of whom have had experience at Eastern State, but not all, and they cycle through. They have a term limit, so there's always new faces coming on that end, and then a couple of our staff members, a couple of members of the programming team. I chair that committee, and on a couple of occasions I have not taken the advice of that committee, but it's very, very rare. In general, what that group decides, there have been many times when I've not gotten my way. I could not convince them that the piece that I really loved would be a great idea, or the piece I had real concerns about could be a mistake. In 20 years, 3 times, on 3 occasions, we have not, 3 specific projects, we have not, out of 90, we've not taken the advice of the committee. But just to be clear that that is a possibility. Does that make sense? That is the process. And I guess that's it. The program's been around since 1995. It began when 2 independent curators, Todd Gillens and Julie Courtney, raised money independently and sort of on a parallel track to the historic site, convinced the city that they should be able to exhibit artwork in here. At the same time, a group of historians and preservationists convinced the city they should be able to give tours in here. And they happened simultaneously in 1995. And they were only coordinated at kind of the last minute. And that was my first year working here. And so I didn't come up with the idea of working with artists, but I spent that summer in 1995 seeing how visitors responded to the art installations. There were 13 of them, and they were wonderful. And they were a very wide range of kinds of work. And we've had art installations ever since. It took us most of the 90s to get back up to speed where we had the right budgets and the right process in place. Though we had some wonderful pieces in the late 90s, it was sort of haphazard. But by the new millennium, we had guidelines in place, a very good committee, dedicated committee to reviewing those proposals, and we've been chugging along ever since. it's one of the things that we're known for, and it's kind of amazing that there are so many historic sites now that work with artists to create work. That's obviously kind of a thing right now. We were not the first, but I think we were early in that arc, and I think that we've had truly excellent work here over the years. So we'll see some of it today. Does that make sense? Make sure I'm not forgetting anything up front. Does anybody have any questions about the process in general? Any thoughts? Comments? You're very quiet, makes me nervous, but that's okay. I'll tell you one more thing. This may be as quiet as it gets for a while, so I'll tell you one more thing while we're standing here. This year, for the first time, we've provided 2 levels of funding. So we've offered $7,500 maximum funding for, I think, about 6 years now. We started with $500, by the way. We've worked it up to $7,500. And we've roughly figured we'd have 4 artist proposals maximum per year. For 2016, we combined 2 of them. So we made 1 at $15,000, 2 remain at $7,500. And so we think there will be 3 artists, 3 teams of artists that we bring, 3 projects we bring in for 2016. That $15,000 level is reserved for an artist or a group of artists for a project that addresses a contemporary issue in the American criminal justice system today. And we want it to be interactive in some way, so visitors can do something with it. And that's all we're saying, and I know it's frustrating that we're not defining it more clearly than that, but it's been my experience, the more you define it, the more you cut off, you don't realize how you're limiting artists and what they will propose. So a lot of my favorite pieces, had we defined our art program really clearly, wouldn't have gotten in because it never occurred to me that was even an approach. So as we say in the guidelines, surprise us. Like we're willing to be surprised. But we want to work with an artist who will address contemporary issues at that $15,000 level. The 2 $7,500 maximum ones can be about anything, including about contemporary issues. But it could be about anything else as well. This building's history, the nature of prisons in general, could be about architecture. We've had work on a whole wide range of topics, but always a topic that feels right within our visitors' overall experience. So we don't want to change the subject dramatically. We want the artist's installations should be site-specific, and they should be an extension of the visitor's experience and be thought-provoking in some way. But they could be, we've had work that's about architecture, about the utopian instinct that we all seem to want to carry out through architecture. We've had pieces that are about just the way the light moves through this building. And as well as many pieces about this building's history, about specific individuals. Does that make sense? Good. Maybe you can explain to me later. I'm kidding. It's a very loose process, and there is a reason for that. Were you going to say something, Joan? Or
yeah, I was going to ask a general question.
Sure.
Since you said surprise us, is there somewhere an archive of the past artist projects that have been done?
Yeah.
So that, like, if I have this really great idea, but then I look back and I find out, oh shit, somebody did that in 2002.
Right, I understand. All the previous art installations are on our website, almost all of them. So if you look at the main website for artists, the bottom of the main page that tells you the orientation dates, just look below the orientation dates. It'll say one of the choices is past installations.
Thank you.
So you can look back. The very early days are not on there, but it's the last 15 years of installations are on there. Yes?
Forgive me if it's really clear in the application
No,
process,
sorry,
but
please.
if you
That's what we're
apply
here
for the larger one and are not successful in that, does the application then also kind of go into the pool for the smaller ones, or do you have to kind of choose?
You have to choose. Yep, you have to choose, and you can't choose both. So you have to choose. Yeah, we'll see. It's our first time doing this, so I've got no idea what to expect. Whether all the applications are going to come in at 15,000. There's typically some negotiation that goes on between when we accept a proposal and when the final vision for the piece is going to be takes place, because the building is so complicated. And we have occasionally come through and said, your proposal's really interesting, but we'd be interested if you would do it like this, but rarely. We're mostly thumbs up, thumbs down. And once artists come in, the artist's work is on the piece, and I really tried to, I will make a lot of suggestions, but I really try to be hands-off, that the final decision. Artists have the ability to speak from first person, which we don't. Like all the exhibits that we build, they sound like museum exhibits because they are. So it's like, Cell Block 7, completed in 1836, exemplifies the architecture copy. Like that's the nature of what we build. But you can sign the work and it's your work, So, but because your name's on it, I really do. I'll make lots of suggestions, but I'll try to I will let you make the final decisions. Make sense? Okay, we're going to take a walk. We're going to go look at some work. We're going to be moving through groups of visitors, so just be sensitive about that. Obviously, they're going to be wanting to get around us and everything else. We will move as quickly as our slowest member, so please keep up. If you want to leave the group, if you're getting bored, I totally get it. Just don't come back, because I don't want to have to answer the same questions a couple times. If we have cell phones, turn them off. I'll do the same for mine. And what else can I say about just general common sense? Oh, we asked you not to take photographs on the tour only because it slows us down. But you're welcome to take photographs all over the site at noon when we're finished. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions while we're here? Okay, here we go. We're going to go back the way we came into cell block 9. Who's here for the first time, out of curiosity? Wow, welcome. Welcome. Well, welcome to Eastern State Penitentiary. We're in cell block 9. As I said, this is not a history tour. I really do encourage you to come back or stay and take the audio tour or meet some of our guides. We're in cell block 9. It's one of the cell blocks that gets used very often for artist installations. Artists ask a lot, how do I figure out where to put my work, or how do I figure out where to propose to put my work? I don't have a good answer for that. I wish I did. I would encourage you to look at the map and go explore. And just keep in mind the main audio tour route, which on our current map is blue. A lot of years it's in red, depending on the time of the year the map changes. But it's the main audio tour route is the one area we don't allow art installations. We find that it makes the most sense to let our visitors tour the building first, get a 45-minute basic history of the building, and then go from there. And so I would just ask that you keep that in mind. But the rest of the building is open game. So rooftops, walls, corridors inside of cells. My general advice is be as general as you can be. So if what you want is a cell with electricity in it, say just that. I want a cell with electricity. Because that gives us confidence we can find a home for you somewhere. We'll find a cell with electricity in it. But if your piece needs to be someplace that's specific, don't be shy. So pieces like Nick Casway's portraits of inmates in the death row population sentenced as juveniles, he wanted that to be outside of our death row for obvious reasons. Judy Taylor made a piece called My Glass House that was about our greenhouse, and she installed it on the glass in our greenhouse, and it was about that piece. It didn't make sense any other place. So if there is a connection to a specific place, don't be shy. If you are flexible about where your piece can be placed, you can also say something like that, like I would like it to be here, but I'm flexible, it could be there, or I'm willing to work with you to site it somewhere. Does that make sense? If you have questions, please give me like 48 hours to get back to you. But I really do respond to every email, and I try to do it quickly, and typically I can do it within a couple hours. But as we get close to the deadlines, I get a lot of emails. So give me some time, but I really will, or else call me at my desk. I'm here to help. I can talk through with you, or we can swap some emails about specific locations in the building if you have questions about them. To be clear, I want the best possible proposals that we can possibly get. So that's why we have these orientations. That's why I want to help you submit something that makes a lot of sense. Probably more than half of the proposals that don't go through to the committee don't go through because they don't follow the guidelines in some way that's important to us. So we are really accommodating. We really try, if not to be sticklers on like the wording of something, or you had you numbered the headline, you numbered the sections wrong, and so we're not doing that. We want the best possible pieces for our visitors. And so if you have a really good idea, we're not going to be sticklers on technicalities about how you phrase something or how you numbered a section. But if you propose to nail something into a wall, we're not going to accept it. Or if you propose to do something, to paint a room, or to do anything that's going to permanently damage. You can come on through, folks. Sorry, we're in your... Not at all, not at all. We're in your way. We're in your way. Not the other way around. Thanks. Sorry about that. Thanks for coming. And so, does that make sense? So, the damage to the building part, the how to install your work part, flummoxes a lot of people, and we trust that you as an artist who builds things and installs things either knows how to solve some of these issues or knows someone who can help you solve these issues. But you cannot drill into the walls, nail into the walls, tape, paint. Excuse me. You have to find a way to put things in the space that can be removed. I'm sorry. they can be removed. So, does that make sense? All right, I'll get water in a second here. So, you'll see solutions to that all over the building as we go through. Jesse Crimes, who just finished his piece, and I'll show you that piece in a minute, has taken the most extraordinary steps to allow himself to attach things to the walls. He's built new walls on every surface of the cell. And now he can do whatever he wants because in the end he'll pull that all back down. But you'll see other solutions around the site as well. In a minute we're going to see Ruth Scott Blackson's piece. And you're going to say, but she attached things to the wall. She did attach things to the wall. Her piece is, she's gold-leafed paint chips that are peeling away from the wall and exposing, it's as if it's exposing something that's really beautiful but had been hidden, and only time and deterioration has shown you that what's hidden underneath the layers of this wall. We love that image and that metaphor. She applied for the 2014 season, but didn't have a good solution for how she could attach and remove those flakes of paint. And so, as I said, we're very accommodating. In her case, we do take effort sometimes if we really like a piece or a proposal. We asked her to come back and reapply for the following year, and we asked her to sit down with our conservator and spend some time talking about the types of adhesives that could do that, and then she tested it. We found a cell that no one's ever going to go into, way off the beaten track. And she did a test, and she attached some paint chips, and a couple months later came back and took them off again, and our conservator gave her the blessing, and she reapplied for this year. Those are extraordinary steps to get to attach a bunch of little chips to a wall, but we found the building in pretty bad shape, and on principle, we don't make it worse. And so, so we take it very, very seriously. A lot of artists will come in and say they just don't, I'm surprised how many of those proposals we still get, but don't propose changing the building. We're not going to accept the proposal. Right across the hall from Ruth's piece is Greg Cowper's piece. It's called Specimen. Greg found a journal entry from the 1890s of a medical doctor who came into Eastern State to visit inmates here and learned that an inmate in the building shared his hobby. They were both lepidopatrists, collectors of butterflies. And so the medical doctor went and visited the inmate and found that in the 1 hour a day the inmate was allowed outdoors in a space about the size of one of these cells but with no roof. He had collected an amazing array of butterflies and moths, some species very rare. And so Greg, who is an entomologist during the day, I always get these confused. Entomologist, right? Bugs? Or is etymologist is words, right? Entomologist is bug. So Greg is an entomologist during the day, and he's continuing the experiment. He came back and began to see what kind of moths and butterflies he could find 120 years later, 130 years later. And then he started collecting beetles and stink bugs, and then he completely lost his mind. And you'll see like all manner of things that he has found around the site. Still mostly focused though on invertebrates, but he collects them. He's probably here today. He lives in the city. We loved that his piece was about something very specific. It was about an actual human being. It was about an actual activity. No one ever wrote down the name of the inmate, by the way. We don't know the name of the inmate who was collecting butterflies, which is a real shame. But we know there was a guy in this building in the 1890s collecting butterflies during the 1 hour a day, which is such a little glimpse of like a human activity and such a monotonous and the architecture implies this great similarity. But in fact, Greg's piece shows us that people surprise you under all kinds of...
Was Greg, when he found that article, was that when the museum found out about that guy with butterflies?
Yes.
Or did you guys know about it already?
When Greg found that article, we had never heard of the whole story.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was in a journal. I said it was a medical journal, but I think I'm mistaken about that. I think it's actually a journal. I think it's the Journal of the Academy of Natural Sciences here in Philadelphia. I'm actually sure that's what it was. It was like their annual report or something. So it was a place we would never have been looking. We wouldn't have thought to be looking there. But they mentioned this trip to Eastern State Penitentiary. Sound good?
We can propose anywhere in the prison.
Yes.
But we're not able to look any place in the prison, are we? Can we go? Like I saw this area where there was two-story cells. You can't get in there. The gate's closed.
Well, if you can't get into it, then our visitor wouldn't be able to get into it either. Yeah. So, I guess I'm not following your question.
Well, I guess I don't understand the idea that you could propose it anywhere.
I'm sorry. I should have been clear. Let me be more clear. You can propose it anywhere the visitors are allowed to go.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So
then you said something on the roof, so visitors can go on the roof?
Well, visitors can see the roofs.
Okay.
So anywhere that a visitor can see. Yeah.
But we can see in that block, for instance, it's 2 stories, but you can't get in there.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination for the time being. I can't give you tours of all those other spaces. Artists could go into those spaces, but visitors can't. But you can't go into those spaces during the orientation
No, right, but I could
process.
say that area I would like to propose
Right.
because someone can see in there, and eventually I'd get in there.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So you could propose something for the second floor of cell block 7,
Yeah.
where visitors cannot go, but they can see
They
it.
can see it, okay.
And if we accept your proposal, we would let you go up there.
Yeah,
Got it.
thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Make sense? Anybody have any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Yes.
Those rooms were very clean.
Those rooms are very clean. Yes, they are.
So how does that correspond with the historic preservation departments?
Okay. We clean the rooms very rarely. We do it on a case-by-case basis when we need to. If we possibly can, we will ask if an artist wants to use a cell that's been cleaned. We have a few of them that aren't being used at any given time, and we will definitely start by asking you to work in a cell that's already been cleaned. We prefer to leave them as we find them. Once you clean them up, it's an irreversible process. I know that sounds really silly because it's just sweeping up a cell. But we do try to leave the building as we found it when we can. And so if we already have some clean cells, we'll ask you to use one of those. Also, every time that there's a cell that a visitor enters, we have an engineer come in and study that space to make sure that it's safe. And every space that visitors go into gets inspected once a year. So that's another reason we want to work in spaces that have been used before. So we'll probably, if you say I would like to have a cell with electricity, I will probably say, let's go take a walk, and we'll pick one, and after we've accepted your work. And we'll go out there and walk, and I'll say, here's one, here's another one, here's a third, and we'll talk it through. But I was saying to some people during the walk, it's really not a good use of your time or mine to pick a specific cell now, unless there's a reason you need that specific cell. So if you want to use the cell that Willie Sutton was held in, it's in cell block 9, then we got to talk about that cell. But if you want, it's just a space with electricity in it, just tell us that. And it's complicated to pick a specific spot, and I'd much rather do it after we've accepted your proposal. The first step after that is a meeting where the artist and I walk through the site and we pick an exact location. Same thing with measurements. The guidelines have measurements in them for a typical cell. The cells are different all over the building. So if we accept your proposal, we'll have to go and pick a specific spot for you, with you, and then you'd want to measure that cell very, very carefully yourself if your piece depends on exact measurements. But at this stage, we are looking for the quality of your idea, and we're looking for your ability to build it.
So I'm not necessarily going to have to say, and here's how I will preserve the plaster fragments on the floor and not disturb them.
Please don't say that, yes.
Okay.
You do not need to say you're going to preserve the plaster fragments on the floor. We will know, we'll figure that out. But really, I strongly encourage you to focus on the quality of the idea and on your ability to build it. And I'll say more about that in a second. Yes, sir?
So, like, walking around, you see things in some of the cells, like the metal framed beds.
Mm-hmm.
Is proposing to incorporate any of that possible?
We don't incorporate any of the artifacts in the building into our own exhibits or into the installations, except the exception is the beds. If you want to use one of the beds, we'd be happy to let you use one of those, only because they're basically indestructible. But everything else is fragile enough that we feel worried that we're not setting a good precedent by incorporating nightstands and foot lockers and hangers on the wall, and you'll find all kinds of debris in some of the cells. The beds, you'll see Michelle Handelman's piece, we'll see in a little bit together. Michelle made a mattress for the bed in that cell, and visitors can sit on the bed to watch her piece. But we consider that, again, reversible. You can remove the mattress, the bed is not going anywhere. The bed is iron, I believe, but it's not going anywhere.
And you can bring things that you replicate or things.
You can bring things that you replicate in, yes. We will look at Alexa Hoyer's piece in a little bit. Alexa's piece is she has DVD players that are hidden inside of stools that are replicated from Eastern State stools, so they look like a stool that an inmate would have had in his cell. But in fact, hers are modern recreations that also have a little hidden compartment for the DVD player inside of them. Yes?
That being said, I just noticed in the last space, the specimen, the tables are doors.
The tables are doors. I was going to mention that. The tables are doors, but not from this prison.
Okay.
They are doors from Holmesburg, which is a prison modeled after Eastern State Penitentiary, and they're nearly identical to Eastern State doors. When they closed Holmesburg, we took all those doors. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they don't exactly fit our doors, and I would love to be rid of them, honestly. They're not, I feel like the preservation standards here should be higher than that, and we should either get an exact replica or not get something that's 80% right. So we have like literally corridors filled with those doors, and so I'm always looking for ways to get rid of them. So if you want to incorporate an oak door or two, that looks very much like an Eastern State oak door, but it's not exactly. You can tell the difference, by the way. The Eastern State oak doors have a little cross. It's not like a crucifix, but it just makes a little cross where the hinge rolls. Al Capone cell has an original Eastern State door, but the Holmesburg doors come down to make a Y. Now you know.
And Holmesburg is still open.
Holmesburg is sort of still open. They use it. They use the cafeteria, the gymnasium as dormitory housing for a couple of inmates at a time. It's basically closed. So yeah, it's more or less gone. Okay, I had a couple other things I wanted to say here, tell you about some of the work in this corridor, and then tell you some things about it. In this corridor, you'll find Tyler Held's piece. Tyler has disassembled a car and reassembled it inside of an Eastern State cell as a metaphor for the way that it feels to be confined. And he also has stripped the car of most of its identifying characteristics, literally ground down the paint off the surface and a lot of the hood ornaments and other things from the car. Going further up the hallway, we have Jess Perlitz. Jess's piece is new for 2015. Jess spent 2 years interviewing or recording inmates in American prisons, including some juvenile facilities, and recorded, her prompt was, if you could sing any song to people on the outside, what would it be? And she recorded all those voices of people singing. Inside of the cell, as you step in, you'll hear 12 of those voices that build slowly. They start with just one voice and they build up to all 12, and then work their way back down to silence again. And out in the corridor, she and I worked very closely on this together. We were looking at a way to let visitors hear every one of the songs clean, beginning to end, just hearing that song. Out of respect for the people who took their time to sing the songs in the first place, it seemed rude to not let visitors actually hear that song. That's sort of the promise that Jess had made, that people will be able to hear this. So outside you'll see a sign with all, and you can hear it through the audio players that our visitors carry. You can hear all the songs. Beyond that is Jesse Crimes' piece. Jesse's piece, Jesse just finished up a 5.5 or 6 year federal prison term. And while he was in prison, made an extraordinary landscape by taking prison bed sheets and transferring images from the New York Times onto those bed sheets, and then augmenting those images, and then mailing them home to himself. And he never saw the finished piece until he got home and reassembled the whole thing in one massive mural. For us, because the installation here would destroy that, he has transferred those images onto fresh bed sheets that friends of his are mailing him out of federal prison. And created a second version of the same mural. He then fitted out an entire cell. He basically framed out an entire cell, and including the arch, which is, I think, pretty complicated carpentry, and then put drywall up. And once he had a drywalled surface, he could do whatever he wanted. And so he attached his mural right to the walls. He put a lot of stucco and gave it a lot of texture. But he was able to do that because when he's done, he will be able to pull every bit of that out of there. Does that make sense? If you folks are waiting to come through, please, come on through. Sorry, we're in your way. I'm sorry for the holdup. Thank you for visiting. Let me tell you one more thing, I'll get right to you. At the very end of the hallway is Karen Schmidt's piece called Cozy. Cozy she's basically yarn bombed an entire cell, making every surface, except for the ceiling. She didn't do the ceiling. She did the walls and the floor and the furniture are all yarn bombed to make the cell look more comfortable than it would ordinarily be, more cozy. She refers to all that stitching, they were just shy of 500,000 stitches, as being like the marks that an inmate might make on a wall to track time. Hi, come on through. Sorry, thanks. When Karen first applied, there was another artist named Jordan Griska, a wonderful Philadelphia-based artist. Actually, he's in New York now, but he wasn't in Philadelphia at the time, who proposed doing the same thing with steel to make a cell look even more frightening and unpleasant and obnoxious than ordinary. And with their permission, they didn't know each other, but with their permission, we cited the pieces across the hall from each other originally. Jordan's piece is gone, but now Karen's is here. I wanted to say a few words about Jess's piece with the inmates singing, and Jesse's piece that he created, the original piece he created while in prison. We of course love to have some work in the building where our artist partners are working directly with inmates. I would just caution you to be careful about suggesting doing something for the very, very first time you've never done before. I'm happy to advise you on that if you want to check in, but it does make us nervous when someone says, I'm going to work with inmates to paint portraits of their officers. And that person, there's no evidence that person's ever met an inmate, doesn't have any idea like how to even begin the process of reaching inmates. That makes us really nervous. Hi, you can come on through if you're waiting. So just please be careful with that. We're always worried about A, whether you can actually pull it off, and B, whether it exploits inmates, whether these are relationships you form once to create this piece and then you walk away, and that it can leave resentment behind if those relationships aren't handled with sensitivity. So just please keep that in mind. Does that make sense? All right. No, sorry, thanks for waiting. You had a question.
I was just wondering, in terms of the audio, like, is there a policy, like, is it allowed in cells or not in corridors, or how does that work, to have actual audio as part of the piece?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. Audio is allowed. Quite a few of our pieces do have audio. If they have audio, we will want to be very careful about where to put it in the building, and that's why we ask in the guidelines, does it include audio? There's something that's a little bit, audio works by their nature can't be contained the way that other works can, and so Jess's piece has audio, and when it really gets up to its height, you can clearly hear it inside of Jesse's piece. And so we had to talk that through with them to make sure that everyone was cool with that. Jesse actually likes it. It's the voices of these inmates singing that drift into his piece, but he could be very, totally understand if he was concerned about that he wanted his work to have a certain quality and it's being impacted by another artist. So for that matter, here we are at Al Capone's cell. At one point we were going to put a piece here that had audio, and we were very worried about our tour guides trying to talk to school groups at Al Capone's cell and then having this audio bleed. Make sense? All right. I have a few more things. We're going to finish up here because the site's so crowded. When we accept a proposal, we consider the artist part of our programming team. You would have access to the site. You would have access to the building as you need. We just consider you part of the family. So at that point, we will begin to talk about how visitors would experience your piece. And as I said before, it's your work and it has your name on it. I will definitely let you know what my recommendations are, and we'll find I've never yet, after 90 artists, never yet been unable to find a compromise where we could figure out where a piece is going to go and how the text is going to sound and how the audio tours are going to sound. The labels, I write the labels with the help of the artist. The artist can does sign off on them, so we'll make sure that you approve of the quality of, we have a tone to the label copy around the site, but I promise you that we'll work together and find something that we both like. And the same thing for the audio tour. Don't bother including that in your budget. At some point when you're here working on your piece, we will record you. The audio engineer and I will suggest an edit of that conversation, typically about a minute, which sounds like nothing. A minute's a fairly long time. And then we'll definitely make sure that you sign off on that and that you are comfortable with what visitors are going to hear you say about your own work. You don't have to use that audio. I strongly encourage artists to do it. But you can also use the players to incorporate aspects of your work, like Jess Perlitz did with all the songs that couldn't make it into the final piece, or even the ones that did make it into the final piece, but they get sung over. You can't hear them clean. All those songs are available outside. So there are any number of ways that other artists have proposed using the audio players. Just keep in mind that all of our visitors, pretty much all our visitors, are walking through carrying this MP3 player and a set of headphones. So, so consider it a tool that is open for you to include. We also have a reception. We'll mail postcards to your mailing lists. Don't bother budgeting for any of that either. I mentioned a second ago that we consider you part of the team. We have at this stage, when artists are proposing work, we have a researcher. Her name is Annie, and she is terrific. She's super smart and very accommodating, as we all try to be around here. And Annie and I have a 5-minute rule for artist questions about history if they are in the proposal process. So at this stage, if you have a question about the building's history, feel free to send me an email or give me a call, and I ask that you give me 48 hours to get back to you. So you want to do it pretty quickly now because we're up to the deadline. If I can answer that question in 5 minutes, I will. If I can't, I'll forward it to Annie, and if she can answer it in 5 minutes, she will. And sometimes it's a matter of attaching a report, like, hey, this is a report that one of our interns wrote 3 years ago. It's pretty good, and it covers the thing you're asking about. And I'll just mail it to you, or email it to you, within 5 minutes. If it's more than 5 minutes, there are just too many artists proposing for us to put in more time than that. However, in the guidelines, there is something called the 565-page history, I think we call it. There's our historic structures report you can download from our website. It's in the guidelines. My advice is to download that as a Word document, because realistically, you're not going to read all 500 pages of it. But if you have it as a Word doc, you can search it. And so if you're writing about women's history, if you're writing about, I always suggest people just type in the word dog and press find, search, and it will find enormous amounts of bizarre information about dogs in this building over time. Or then canine and anything else, any other puppy, whatever else you can find, you'll find all kinds of stuff in there. Try film, just type in the word cinema and see what you come up with. It's amazing how much detail there is about life in this building over time. Once an artist has, once we have accepted a proposal, as I say, that artist is now part of our team. Annie has at times spent enormous amounts of time working with artists if their work requires a lot of research to get the piece right. And the example I would use there is Cindy Stockton Moore's piece. Cindy came in and said that she wanted to paint the portraits of men, women, and children whose murderers became Eastern State Penitentiary inmates. And we really are always looking for stories that tell that aspect of the Eastern State legacy. I think it's very natural that as people walk through the building, they feel empathy for the inmates, and we certainly encourage that, but there are reasons that prisons exist, and there's a whole history to why people wound up at Eastern State, why they wind up in prisons today, and we want to be sensitive to that part of the story as well. Cindy's piece is pretty amazing. It has 50 portraits of men, women, and children whose murderers became Eastern State inmates. And so she said she was going to do that. I think she only found 1 or 2 at the proposal process. But it was clear she was going to be able to find many, many more. And she didn't have to find all of them. She had to tell us, this is my idea. My idea is to paint these portraits and hang them in this way. Once she started, she worked very closely with Annie, and I would guess that it was about 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 Cindy's work, 1/3 Annie's work, to track down photographs of the victims. They're very hard to find. The prison documents they're silent on it. This institution wasn't tracking what inmates did to get here. So she had to go back and find the court records, then find the court records and newspaper stories. Incidentally, she found something. This was another moment when we had to negotiate what to do about this. None of us saw this coming, but what she found, her piece is called Other Absences, and it's about the stories you're not hearing as you walk through learning about the inmates. You're not hearing about the backstory of what led to their being here in the first place. But there was another absence that we discovered, that she discovered, which is that when wealthy white people are murdered, their photographs are on the cover of the newspaper the next day, and when poor people die in neighborhoods that are rarely given much attention outside of those neighborhoods, those stories go mostly untold. And so what she did find in the end was mostly a group of white and also surprisingly good-looking people whose photographs she could find as victims of crime, whose murderers became Eastern State inmates. So there's this whole other absence of people of color and people who grew up in poverty that those stories just aren't in her cell either. And so we had to figure out what to do about that. So we talked about that. I made sure she talked about that on her audio tour, which she agreed was necessary. And also on the signage, you'll see it mentioned. There's a long description of that. So I think we're down to, I could tell you what else I recommend you see. If we had more time together, I'd show you together. Let me make some recommendations of things to look at before you go home today. Here in cell block 10, there are 3 pieces. All of our work in 2015, all of it is great. I keep saying these are great pieces. Going in order down the hallway, you'll hit Bill Cromar's piece called Gitmo. It's a recreation of a Guantanamo Bay cell inside of an Eastern State Penitentiary cell. I would point out that he poured a concrete slab in that cell. So you can do really ambitious things if you convince us you know what you're doing. And in his case, he told us a specific contractor and showed us an example of a time that he had poured a slab and then removed it and was able to get a slab off of a space and have no trace left. So there's layers of felt and plastic, which turns out, I guess, is how you do this. But he literally has a concrete slab as part of his cell. We thought for years we would take that piece out when Guantanamo Bay was no longer a significant issue that Americans should be discussing about criminal justice and due process. It is still there. So in 2013, I guess, I worked with Bill's permission to update the signage and talked about how much Guantanamo Bay has changed. What he shows you is a space that's no longer even used at Guantanamo Bay. That's the original encampment. For better or for worse, it's a much more professionally run prison system down there that looks like it's not going anywhere. What they originally built was basically dog kennels, but it looked like it was very temporary. So we talked about that. Going past Bill's piece, there's Michelle Handelman's piece called Beware the Lily Law. Michelle proposed in, I think, 2009, making a piece about the issues faced by trans inmates in our prison system, also the issues faced by the institutions themselves to house and have custody over inmates who are trans. And at the time, it was the first time I'd ever given it any thought at all, that whole issue. And since then, it's everywhere. I mean, it's like wherever you look, that's such an important subject in prisons today. But Michelle was way ahead of the curve in drawing our visitors' attention to that issue. She filmed actors performing scripts that she wrote based on stories that she'd researched of inmates, trans inmates in American prisons today. And it's very eerie the way that it's projected on the back wall of the cell. That's a piece I mentioned to some people earlier that we generally take down the electronic pieces in the winter because they don't survive. Other than that, the electronics around here do surprisingly well. I've always been amazed, but they do pretty well. We learned an expensive lesson, though, with Michelle's piece, not to run a projector all winter because it just kept freezing. And at the very end is Alexa Hoyer's piece. Alexa's piece, it's called I Always Wanted to Go to Paris, France. In a cell, she has clips of prison movies, like 5-10-second clips from prison movies that take place in a cell. And then in the corridor, she has inmates being led through corridors from prison movies, and in the shower, she has inmates in showers in prison movies. We love the piece because it brings up the sort of the visual memory that we all think we have of what the inside of a prison looks like. And of course, the shower you're sitting in looks nothing like the showers that you see inside of her piece. I should mention that Alexa's piece has been here for now 10 years, which is a very long time for a temporary art installation. Typically, artists whose work is here for 1 year, we accept the proposal, the work is here. At that point, I will make a recommendation to our committee because we, the staff, are with the pieces all season long, so we see visitors responding to them. So I'll make a recommendation, which they generally take, about whether or not a piece is really working for our visitors or whether it's not. And if the piece is working, it typically stays here for 2 or 3 years. And so in some cases, like Alexa's, we used to have an unwritten rule that it was 10 years. I think of it as the Michael Grothusen rule. Michael had a wonderful piece that we loved called Midway of Another Day. And we got to 10 years with Michael's piece and said, this really is pushing the definition of temporary installation. It also happened to be on the audio tour route, which we were at that point had decided was not a great idea. And so we took Michael's piece out. We asked him to take his piece out. We got to Alexa's last summer, and I said, this would be the 10th year. This really should be the last year. We have this unwritten rule about 10 years, and the committee said, why didn't you ever write the rule down if it's unwritten? And so I guess now the unwritten rule is 11 years. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how much longer her piece is here. Visitors really respond to her piece, and we think it's a very important aspect of what we do here. So we'll see. You can hear it playing a little bit in the background. I would strongly recommend you see Cindy Stockton Moore's piece, which is the piece, the Other Absences I was telling you about with the murder victims. It's in the end of cell block 11, but you can only enter it from the back. So I would walk down here, take a left, and then go into Cindy's piece and see it. And definitely don't leave before you see the big graph. The big graph has been with us now for a year. We built it in-house. It is not an artist installation. It is the sort of the signature experience now that we've built for visitors, either on a guided tour or an audio tour. Every single visitor goes to the big graph and is invited to look at 3 sets of statistics about the American prison system today. And it reflects a real commitment to talk about the criminal justice system today, not at the edges of our property, not only working through artists, because for a long time we had wonderfully thought-provoking work that artists had brought to us, but we're committed learning from artists. We're committed to talking about that stuff in our own programming. And as now, if you take an audio tour, it ends at the graph. And so every single visitor who takes a basic audio tour ends with a visual representation of the growth of the US prison population, the racial breakdown of the prison population over time, and how we compare to other nations in the percentage of our population we keep in prison. I'm guessing most of you know the answer to that, but a lot of our visitors don't. And so the new exhibit we're building, called Prisons in the Age of Mass Incarceration, that's a working title, probably not what we'll call the actual finished exhibit, is a companion piece to the big graph. So while the big graph shows you what the prison population looks like from a distance and shows you the history of how we got here, the new exhibit is meant to show you what it looks like up close. It's meant to talk about the human impact and meant to ask questions about where we go. Because as we've developed that exhibit, we've been finding there's really no longer any supporters of the prison population being run at the scale we are running it now. There's essentially no one left arguing that it makes sense to incarcerate at the scale we're incarcerating in this country. And so the question really is, what now? How do we get, like, what's the strategy we have to bring this back down and all those other kind of questions. The reason I bring it up is because that exhibit, opening in May of 2016, we want an artist to make something else somewhere else on the property that is a companion piece to it. That is at $15,000 level, is a companion piece to the new exhibit, an artist from his or her or their perspectives, bringing about another way for our visitors to reflect on the criminal justice system today. Does that make sense? I've been talking a lot. Does anyone have any questions?
Is there any photographic work exhibited?
Is there any photographic work exhibited? I'm glad you asked that. We have had photographic work exhibited in the past. I think right now we have none. I would caution you against putting photographs on a wall and suggesting that for your work. The successful photography that we've exhibited here in the past has been exhibited in some way that incorporated the architecture and responded to the spaces, and also just to the practicality that I said a second ago that electronics do well, paper does not. Paper is the one thing. Paper looks terrible. A week in, it'll be wrinkled and swollen with humidity, and 6 weeks in, you'll start seeing it fade. Works on paper don't work well here. We've had photography that has been shown on screens and projected. We've had Judy Taylor, I mentioned earlier, she did direct emulsion prints onto glass and put those into our greenhouse. How else have we used photography? Ann Mesner made a newspaper. She made a 10,000 edition newspaper that she gave away for free. It was on an honor box like the Village Voice, and you just take it. But a lot of that was her own photography of this building, but also in a very pointed way, making a counterpoint of a clear comparison between tourists enjoying themselves and walking through this prison today and coming here because it's sort of fun and interesting, with inmates actually living in these spaces. And she was intentionally calling to question the taste of what we're doing here, which we thought was really great. That we think there's a lot of room for that conversation. But her photographs she printed them on paper but gave them away in this edition of newspapers. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Any other questions while we're here? Any other thoughts? You're very quiet, makes me nervous, but that's all right. I am here to help. I want the best possible, I want to help you submit the best possible proposal so that if you have a great idea, you don't get tripped up on something that we could have fixed at this stage. So let me know. Give me a call or send me an email. Yes?
Quick question. The audio exhibit we went by had a triggering mechanism. Is that something that's, why not just have motion loop? Is that preferred?
The audio piece we walked by is Jess Perlitz's piece. It does have a triggering mechanism. We've been fighting with it, and it doesn't work particularly well. So no, it's not preferred or not preferred. That's something that I've been talking with the artist about a way to fix that, because a lot of visitors don't get to experience it because the triggering mechanism isn't great. Personally, I don't prefer them. I much prefer just running a loop. But it's Jess's work, and she has a certain vision for the way she wants people to interact with it, and I need to respect that too. So we've been negotiating, trying to figure out where to go with that.
And just in terms of numbers, we'll be accepting 3 artist proposals.
We think we'll be accepting 3 artist proposals, which brings me actually to my final point I was going to make. And I say this to every tour, every orientation tour. It's about budgeting. I really recommend that you propose to do it right. We are not looking for bargains. I mean, in theory, if we got a bunch of $2,000 proposals, we could accept more of them. Don't do that to yourself. Don't submit an inexpensive proposal thinking it's going to help. Usually it makes me nervous. When I see a proposal for $1,000, I think, we don't want someone to build something for the first time, take a shot at, and hope it works out. You know, we want to work with professionals. We work from our visitors back. We want a great, thought-provoking, memorable, troubling, humorous, thought-provoking experience for our visitors. In some ways, we want to make an emotional connection or an intellectual point or create a moment that person really sticks with that person, and we're not looking to save money. So I wish we had $30,000. We don't, but we have 2 slots at $7,500 and 1 at $15,000. And we feel much better when an artist comes in and says, I need an assistant to help me install this. I need to spend a little more time in the city than you might think, but I've left myself a couple extra days of a hotel room because I worried about running into problems late in the process. Please just propose to do it right. And we do require that you submit some artist fee. Artists exploit themselves. I feel terrible about it, but you all do it. I don't know if you all do it. In my experience, most artists end up exploiting themselves. They end up spending more money than they're given. I don't know how they couldn't, considering that the money we give them isn't a huge amount of money. But please, we do require you at least give yourself some money in that budget. We do not get hung up on you saving receipts. We cut you a check for $0.75 of the dollars right after the new year. We have to wait for our new fiscal year, so we'll wait until January 1st. We cut the artist a check for $0.75, and then we wait until the artist's piece is removed. So often it's years later. We'll give you the last quarter of the budget.
11 years later.
11 years later in Alexa's case. I have to look up, I don't even know. It's so funny. We do that because some pieces like Tyler's piece, the car, that's a major project of the piece out. So we want to make sure that he understands it and it's his responsibility to come take it back out again. Yes?
Is there an archival component to the surplus doors from the other prison? Do they have to remain intact?
Oh no, the doors from the other prison, please cut them up. As long as you don't bring them back, you can do whatever you want with them. No, you'll see that Greg's piece, he cut them all up. They're all sliced up into pieces. Yes?
I saw they were hanging, or I think it was the grid of speakers from the windows.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to hang something, do you have to let it be known that you need to be in a cell that's possible from, or is that possible from all?
It's pretty much possible in all of them. The model cell that we give you in the guidelines is a cell that has that bar in it, and most of the cells that we exhibit work in, just by nature of the building, are in cell blocks 8, 9, or 10, and they all have those bars. So just assume that it's there. And certainly we can find you one that has one if that's what you need. Yes?
Do you have any guidelines or preferences in terms of if your project has a time-based component like video, do you kind of not want people sitting in a cell for a half hour? You know what I mean? Do you want, like traffic-wise, do you have any kind of guidelines for that?
That's a good question. I always try to speak on behalf of the committee when I say these things. I would say from a programming, I'm the director of interpretation. I oversee all the programming in the building. I think videos that last more than 5 minutes are probably not a great idea. Just the nature, people don't leave that much time. Most of our visitors, by the way, don't know there's art installations here, and many of them leave the property, walk away, and don't know they have seen art installations. I would suggest that to you, as an artist, that is an enormous opportunity to speak to an audience. It's not a gallery audience. It's not even a museum audience. That sounds condescending. I don't mean that way at all. I adore our audience. It's great. But we don't have a fine arts audience. And so you're building for people. This may be the only contemporary work they see all year. But anyway, they don't come in expecting to spend 3.5 hours here. Our typical stay is over 2 hours. The audio tour is 40 minutes right from the beginning. But people often have to leave because they have to move their cars or they have to get on the trolley that's leaving or because we're closing. And so they often are getting pulled around the site. They're kind of in a hurry. There's a lot to do here. So I would say 5 minutes would be pretty good. Then again, the tunnel video, which Conrad put together, come to think of it, a long time ago, our videographer, that thing is much longer than 5 minutes. It's like 15. People watch that thing all the time. So, I don't know. I don't have any, there's no hard and fast rule.
Last question, can
Yes.
you use the outside as well? Or
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Can you use the outside of the building as well? We have done it twice. If you want to propose, if you do propose use the outside of the building, probably talk to me first or send me an email first. Our neighbors don't care at all what we put on the inside of the building, but they care very much what we put on the outside of the building.
the outside, I also mean like these hallways, so not just the outside walls, but within the building?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So, oh, I forgot to tell you about one piece to look at. You can look at Eric Oakday's piece. It's on the baseball diamond outdoors right now. So we currently have work outdoors on the baseball diamond. The corridors are also, we've also had in the past work in the corridors. If it's not on that audio tour line, it's fair game. But as I say, you can't, visitors can't get every single place. Does that make sense? All right. I have one more thing for you. I've got a survey here. I really do read these, so I'm going to pass these around. If there's a way we can make this process better, we know this process is time consuming, and if there's a way we can make it a better process, we will. I know that it'd be easier to submit electronically, and so I'm aware that's a comment we get back a lot. The electronic submissions are just beyond us right now. We're a small staff and a small organization, and to print out 12 copies for all of our reviewers and all that stuff, there's a whole set of steps there. So currently we do require that you actually physically get us paper copies. I realize that's a headache for you. We are aware that's something that artists would like. But you're welcome to write that down, or anything else, any other way that you think this process could be improved, we would love to know. Sound good? It was nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming. Go taste some prison food if you get a chance. Thanks for being here.